Welcome to Lesson 4 in this Autodesk Inventor Beginner Series. If you have not seen the first 3 lessons and you need to get a little bit of a foundation in the basics of drawing in Inventor, please go watch those now. But if you've done that, or if you've got a little bit of background and you just happen to land here, feel free to join in and follow along as we draw this part that you see on the screen in front of you. Let me wipe this down and we'll start with a brand new part. Again, create a new part from one of our templates. Start a 2D sketch on our XY plane. In the previous lessons, we have used rectangle commands to create a solid block, but this time I want to back up and use just a line command. We could create a rectangle and then take a chunk out of it, but let's just draw lines in the shape that we want. You just click point to point, click once, release. Move to where you want your new point, click again, click again. Notice it comes down here to this x-axis, and we'll kind of jump to that axis and snap in place there. Come back to the origin. Now we have completed a closed profile. We need a closed profile to extrude our solid. Now we right click and say OK. Let's add some dimensions to it, make it 5 inches tall. 4 inches wide. We'll make this leg here 0.750, and what we learned in the previous lesson, I can drop this dimension here while it's highlighted, come click my previous dimension, so that no matter what, those two dimensions will always be the same. If I came back in and changed that to 0.5, it adjusts the other one as well. We'll go back to 750, right click that, say OK, right click, and finish sketch. Zoomed into the view we were in when we started the sketch, so we will zoom out. We want to extrude to create a solid, but we're going to do something a little different this time. Look at these direction arrows here. The first one that it defaults to brings material from the sketch plane towards us. With the flipped option, it sends material away from us. We can use the third option here. This time is what we're going to use to be symmetric around that origin plane that we clicked on. We will make this thing 3 inches wide. That is the basic shape for this angle plate that we're going to work on. Now, why did I choose to make this be symmetrical around that origin plane? Why not just go one direction or the other? Why make it symmetrical? Here is a very good reason. I want to sketch in a triangle here that is going to become that rib. If I come back here to the origin folder, select that XY plane that cuts through the middle of the part, now I can sketch right back on that plane and put my new sketch right in the middle of the part. Going to use line again. I bring my cursor over that edge of the part, it projects that edge for me, snaps onto it, select there, come down to the other leg and select there. Now here's an important feature when we are sketching inside a part, because that sketch plane cuts through our part. If you press F7, it will cut your part in half, and that'll let us see a little bit better what's going on in here. I want to continue my line from that end over here to this vertex, and then from that vertex back up to where I started. Right click and say OK. See, I can move that up and down, I can move that left to right, but they are stuck to those legs of that triangle, or the two legs of our angle plate. I need a couple of dimensions to get everything locked, so come off the top edge of the part here, come to that endpoint of that line, or the vertex of the triangle. Let's make that 0.5. Come out here to the end of the part for our last dimension. Go to the other corner of that triangle. And as before, I want both of these to have the same value. Go click on that other dimension. So now D7 is locked in to be equal to D6. Check that. My triangle has turned black. Everything is fully constrained. Right click, finish that 2D sketch. On to extrude again. See, it selects that profile that we created, brings it towards us, using the same value that we just used. I don't want all of the material on one side. I want to go symmetric again, and we will make that rib 1/2 inch, 0.5 wide. Say OK. Now we can see that we have that rib through the middle of the part. I want to put some tapped holes in this part, so let's go back and start a new sketch. Click on that face. We will create points again. Place those 4 points on that face, right click and say OK. Now we need to give them some dimensions. Let's see how few dimensions we can put on this thing to get the result that we want. I'm going to add the first dimension. Let's make that 0.625. Give it another dimension. I want it to be 0.625, but I want it to always be equal to that. And go back and click on that. Now dimension 11 is equal to dimension 10. Check that. Let's use some horizontal and vertical constraints now. Let's use a horizontal constraint between that point and that point. Let's take a vertical constraint between the top left and the bottom left. Another vertical constraint. Click there. Click there. Right click and say OK. Let's see what we have accomplished. I've got this point that can move up and down, this point that moves up and down, these two move up and down together. I need a few more constraints. Let's go back to horizontal constraint. Make that one, click that one, right click, say OK. Now those two are locked together. The top two are locked together. So I need to give them dimensions off the top and bottom edges of the part. Do I want this to be 5/8? If I do, I can use that same dimension again. Come in and place a dimension off the bottom edge of the part, and I want it to be 5/8 as well. If I make it equal to this dimension, then that means anytime I come in here and edit that dimension, all of these will move together and stay at the same value. Let's finish that sketch. Add a hole. I'm going to use the same 5/16, 18 holes that we used before. Say OK. And we have our angle plate with some tapped holes in the bottom. Let's do one more thing to dress it up a bit. Maybe if this was a casting, it would have some nice round corners inside here. Come in and select all these edges all around that rib. That gets all of the ones that we want. So we say OK. Let's call this part done. We will save it as lesson 4.